We have made it. Okay. Setting up the meeting. And in just a moment, we'll be there. Made a blessing earlier. I'm going to say l'chaim, everyone.
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
I am.
L'chaim.
And just ready. Technology is great. There we go. Okay, beautiful. So I'm going to share screen, but before I do that, I just want to go a little bit back. When we're talking here, let's talk a little bit about loopholes in the Torah law. So we believe gave us the Torah. So different than a man-made law, you could have man-made law, let's say the Constitution or American law in general, or any governing ordinance. The people were trying to get a specific point across, and sometimes they use the wrong verbiage, or sometimes they accidentally leave things out, and that creates loopholes within the law that were not intended to be loopholes. And when you use those loopholes, you're getting around and evading the system. When God created the Torah, it's not like he forgot. If God would have forgot certain details or would not have known about certain situations that could arise, then that's not God. So if we believe that God is the one who gave us the Torah, then we believe it's a loophole that wasn't. So when we're studying these, when does the human dignity supersede Torah law, we're not trying to figure out on our own what fits best with our moral compass or what fits best for us. The question is, how was this set up to begin with? What does God want from us in these circumstances? Right? We'll take a very simple example. The law that life supersedes Shabbos. In other words, someone who has an emergency on Shabbos is not only permitted, not only encouraged, but commanded to drive themselves to the hospital to get checked out, or to call 911 for the ambulance to take them, depending on the severity of the situation. That is not us coming and saying we would rather be alive than listen to God. God forbid. It's the other way around. God says that if you're in a situation of life-threatening danger, you must break the Shabbos in order to stay alive. So with that introduction, let's share screen and jump right in. And we're going to come along and bring another proof over here. Okay. Beautiful crowd this morning. Does everyone see my screen?
Sure.
Sorry?
First there was no sound and now there's no picture. Now I can see what you got on screen, the text.
Okay, great. Gemara cites an additional proof from a brisa. Come and hear. Come and hear is a term that's used whenever we're quoting from a brisa. We'll say, come and hear. Listen to this proof. Great is human dignity as it overrides a prohibition in the Torah. Which one? We're going to see which one. But as of now, we're thinking that this brisa means that human dignity will override any prohibition in the Torah. For example, if a person is in a, I have to be clear, this is the pretense that the Gemara is thinking, how we're going to translate this to begin with. This is not the conclusion. This is a thought that perhaps that if a person is with a bunch of Goyish friends or business people, and they're pressuring him that he should come to them with them to the restaurant, and it'll be embarrassing for him if he doesn't go with them to eat in the non-kosher restaurant, that he should be allowed to, because human dignity is overriding prohibitions of the Torah. So the Gemara challenges that and says, why? Let us also say here, there is neither wisdom, nor understanding, nor counsel against the Lord. In other words, if God said something, you can't now come along and say, well, I feel that I would be more comfortable if I didn't listen. One of the biggest things that people say, and we're all, I don't want to use the word guilty of this, but this is part of the human condition. that when it comes to something that's not comfortable or that we're not used to or that we're not interested in, it happens to me myself as well. If God would have known my situation, he would never have said that this is what you have to do. Right? If God would have known my situation, he never would have said you have to keep Shabbos. If God would have known my situation, he never would have said that you're not allowed to steal. Or whatever it is. If God would have known my situation, he would never have said that you have to pray 3 times a day. Whatever it is. Each person has these times in their lives where we feel like God didn't understand me when he wrote the book. But the truth is exactly the other way around. God knows who I am. He understands my struggles. And still he said, this is what I want from you. So Rav Bar Shaba interpreted this prohibition, which is overridden by human dignity before Rav Kana, as a first specific prohibition. The prohibition says, down to you, you shall do. In other words, the Torah and the oral tradition, which I am telling you today, you should do exactly as I say. You shall not deviate to the left or to the right from which they tell you. You have to listen to everything that the governing body of the Jewish people have accepted from generation to generation, and you have to listen to what they say. And Rav Kana said that can be overridden by human dignity. In other words, if human dignity is at stake, you don't have to listen to the rabbis of the generation. So the yeshiva students laughed at him. Of course you
Rabbi,
have to
you lost
listen.
your audio.
I lost my audio?
Okay,
Not
now
for
you're
me.
back.
I can hear you.
I can hear
You
you.
can hear me?
Now you
Yeah.
Okay,
can,
good.
yeah.
Okay.
You blinked
So-
out for a little bit.
Okay, so let's back up just a moment. Rav Kana said that so the way Judaism works is that in every generation, up until a certain point, let's say till the end of the Talmud, so the rabbis had a certain stature, and what they said, especially during the Sanhedrin, the time of the High Court, of the 71 judges, the Torah says whatever they tell you to do, whatever their conclusions are, that's what you have to abide by. And Rav Kana is saying that when human dignity is on the line, you don't have to listen to them. And the yeshiva students burst out laughing. Because the prohibition of you shall not deviate is by Torah law, like all other Torah prohibitions. Why should human dignity override it any more than any other? So what's going on? Rav Kana replied to them, a great man has spoken, do not laugh at him. You're laughing because you don't understand what he was saying. Let me tell you. The sages based all rabbinic law on the prohibition of you shall not deviate. In other words, anything that is rabbinic law is binding because of this verse that you shall not deviate from whatever the rabbi to do. The concern, I don't mean the rabbi, about the great rabbis, the high court, etc. Those who were awarded that power. So anything that is rabbinic in nature is based on this law of you shall not deviate from that which they tell you to do. However, due to concern for human dignity, the sages permitted suspension of rabbinic law in cases where the two collide, meaning all rabbinic decrees are predicated on the mitzvah and the Torah to heed the judges in each generation and to never stray from their words. Therefore, when the sages suspend a decree in the interest of preserving human dignity is overriding a Torah prohibition. In any case, it only overrides rabbinic decrees. So, for most rabbinic decrees, when they made those decrees, they said, if it collides with human dignity will come first. We're going to get to some examples. But the bottom line is that we see from here that there are certain things, for example, rabbinic decrees, which are superseded by human dignity.
I knew an
And
Orthodox,
rabbinic, sorry?
I knew an Orthodox doctor who did heart transplants. And I said to him, how do you know if there's a heart available on, on Hot Shabbos? And he said he had two phones. If one rang, he didn't answer it. If the other one rang, it meant a heart was available. And he went to the hospital.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. For example, on Shabbos, we're not allowed to carry in a public domain. In the olden days, they used to use rocks when they went to the bathroom, smooth rocks to wipe themselves. But let's use the example of toilet paper. Let's say that you ran out of toilet paper or tissues and you need the bathroom. Your friend lives across from the public domain. You want to go and bring a box of tissues back over. So the rabbi, actually, it's not a good example. Let's talk about the stones in the olden days. Okay, so it might be a little uncomfortable, and it might be a little strange to us because we can't really imagine that. But in the olden days, they used to use smooth stones. They had special stones that were used, and they would use those stones to wipe themselves. I guess they would wash them, or they probably didn't sanitize them between each person. Maybe each person had their own set of stones. I don't know how it worked. But they used stones to wipe themselves after the bathroom. Now, stones on Shabbos are forbidden to be touched on Shabbos. Familiar with the word muktzah, it's set aside that stones we don't use on Shabbos. However, because a person needs to go to the bathroom and needs to wipe themselves, the rabbis suspended their prohibition against touching stones on Shabbos in the interest of human dignity, that a person should be able to wipe themselves. Similarly, if a person is wearing a talis, in the olden days, they didn't wear a talis as a separate prayer shawl only for prayers, but they would wear their article of clothing was basically their talis, was their cloak. And what happens if the string's ripped? If the string's ripped, so technically on Shabbos is not allowed to carry them because it's not a kosher talis. So by rabbinic law, he would have to drop it there and go home. But because that would leave him without any clothing, the rabbis suspended their prohibition against carrying a quote-unquote broken talis in the street in the interest of the person being allowed to walk home clothed. So those are some examples of rabbinic decrees that are suspended in the interest of yes.
The last sentence, starting with therefore, it doesn't seem to make much sense. When the sages suspended decree in the interest of human dignity is overriding a Torah prohibition, in any case, it only overrides rabbinic decrees. Is that a misprint? Because it doesn't seem to make much sense.
Yeah. So thank you for asking that. What is the Torah prohibition? All of the rabbinic decrees are technically a Torah prohibition as well, because the Torah tells you that you have to listen to the rabbis. So therefore, any prohibition that the rabbis enact, you are obligated to listen to by a prohibition in the Torah against disobeying the rabbis. The Torah tells you that the judges and the court, whatever they say, you have to listen to, and you cannot deviate from what they say to the right or to the left. So all of the rabbinic decrees are rabbinic decrees, but they are hinging on a Torah precept that you have to listen to what the rabbis say. So We're
But there
overriding a
were
Torah
no
prohibition and not
rabbis when the
having to listen.
Torah was written.
Say again?
There were no rabbis when the Torah was written. We had priests.
Of course we had rabbis. Moshe Rabbeinu was a rabbi. We had the 70 judges, the 70 elders already then.
Aren't the priests all rabbis?
Sorry?
Weren't the priests all rabbis?
The priests were all, I'm also a rabbi, but the fact that I'm a rabbi, I'm not the kind of rabbi that I can start enacting decrees.
Right. But human
Right, so
dignity is overriding it.
So whenever the sages are suspending a rabbinic decree, they're technically suspending a Torah prohibition because the Torah tells you that you have to listen to the rabbis. So if they say that in this circumstance, for human dignity, you don't have to listen to the rabbis, then that's a Torah prohibition. Is that more clear?
Not really.
Okay, so let's read it through this one more time. All rabbinic decrees are predicated on the mitzvah and the Torah to heed the judges in each generation and to never stray from their words, right? So any time that the rabbis made a decree, why do you have to listen to the rabbinic decrees? Because the rabbis decided? No. Not because the rabbis decided, but because the Torah says, you shall not deviate from their words to the right or to the left. So any time that we are suspending a rabbinic decree, we are overriding a Torah decree to listen to the rabbis.
Oh, okay. I got it now. All right, that's clear.
Because the authority that was given to the rabbis was given by the Torah. Therefore, if they say human dignity is coming above and superseding the authority of the rabbis, that means that we're going, that we are superseding a commandment in the Torah, a precept to listen to the rabbis.
Okay. I got it now.
So here we have, okay, good. Thank you for asking. So here we have another interesting thing, which is actually going to be from this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion talks about the Jewish roadside assistance law. This is part of why we are so into taking care of each other. The Gemara cites an additional proof from a brisa. Let me ask you, if you find something in the street, what do you do with it?
And know what it
Return.
is.
You have to find out who it belongs to.
You have to find out who it belongs to. So the Gemara is going to cite a proof from a brisa coming here with regard to the laws of returning a lost object. It is stated in this week's Torah portion, you shall not see the ox of your brother or his sheep go astray and ignore them. Return them to your brother. So let's take apart this verse for a minute. What's the simple explanation of the verse? Who wants to go at it?
You find something, you return it to whoever
If you
owns
find
it.
something, you return it. Very good. Does anyone want to tell me what extra words are in this verse?
The ox of your brother or the sheep go astray and ignore them.
Okay, you've got that in there, right? So you shall not see the ox of your brother or his sheep, right? So we're giving examples, and they're going astray, and ignore them. The words "and ignore them" are superfluous. The verse could have just said, you shall not see the ox of your brother or his sheep go astray. Return them to your brother. So why does the verse say, and ignore them?
Make it clear.
So, say again?
Just to make it more clear.
Okay, so the simple reading of the verse is just to make more clear. But here's what we received with the oral tradition. The Brisa explains that the seemingly extraneous expression "and disregard them" or "and ignore them" must be understood to give license, that at times you disregard lost objects, and at times you do not disregard them. In other words, we're reading the verse like this. Sometimes we're going to read the verse, if you see the ox of your brother or his sheep go astray, ignore them. What would be an example? What do you think would be an example of a time where you see someone else's lost object and you ignore it?
I don't see how you come to that conclusion. That's it's you're saying that it means the opposite of what it's saying. That you're saying that sometimes and ignore them means that sometimes you do ignore them.
Sometimes you ignore them and sometimes you don't ignore them. The Torah is giving license here that sometimes really you're supposed to ignore them.
Yeah. Can you explain how they concluded that from that statement?
So the real answer is because this is what their teacher taught them, which their teacher taught them, which Moses she received as a translation, as a valid translation from God. But the way it fits in the verse is it works much better in the Hebrew, because in the Hebrew, actually over here it's not too bad. Give me a second. I just want to make sure that my memory isn't fading me over here. Yeah. Okay. You could read this if you want to read it out of context. Of course, out of context. But sometimes there's a medrash, a fascinating medrash, that the Ten Commandments, right? Do not kill, for example. Says, Lo tirtzach, thou shalt not kill. The translation of that is Loi, no, tirtzach, kill. No kill. No steal. That. And there's a medrash, fascinating medrash, that says there's supposed to be a period between each of those words. No. Kill. No. Covet. Be jealous. How does that make any sense? Oh, the Torah tells us that if
Are you
person,
reading from this?
No, I'm giving an explanation.
Okay, because I'm trying to find where you're reading.
Yeah, we're going off script a little bit here.
Okay.
So there are times where you do have to kill. For example, if an enemy is rising against you to kill you, the Torah tells you, kill him. If you see a person who is greater than you spiritually, you should covet his place and you should try as much as you can to be like them. So sometimes if we read the word, yes, it's out of context, but this is an out of context reading that was taught to us and handed down through the tradition. So here's how we're going to read it. I know my video is paused, but can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It goes like this. You shall not see the ox of your brother or his sheep go astray. Right? Don't look at the ox of your brother or his sheep when they're going astray and ignore them. That's how you're supposed to read it sometimes. So I want you all to come up with an example of when would the right thing be to turn around and to turn away if you see something that someone lost.
If it's not kosher?
Interesting example. If you see someone that dropped their McDonald's burger, should you go and pick it up and give it back to them? That's a very good question. Any other ideas?
If it puts you in personal peril to retrieve that object.
Oh, very good. If you see a guy who's running from the gang and the gang are after his watch, and they have their guns drawn and he drops his watch, should you go now and pick up that watch to bring it back to him?
Yeah.
Or should you ignore it and run the other way? So you see, there are times where we can come up with examples ourselves that the correct and moral thing to do is to turn away from it and to ignore it and to pretend you didn't see it. Is that starting to become a little more clear?
Yes.
So let's look at the examples that the Gemara is going to give. Right, the Brisa is explaining that the seemingly extraneous expression and disregard them must be understood to give license. That at times you disregard lost objects and at times you do not disregard them. How so? If he was a priest, a Kohen who is not allowed to become impure and is not allowed to visit a cemetery, and the lost object is inside the cemetery. If you're a Kohen and you see your neighbor's sheep and it's running in the cemetery, should you go and make yourself impure and go into the cemetery to bring it back to him? The answer there is no. Or if he was an elderly person and it is beneath his dignity to tend to a lost object of that kind. Let's say it's a little cow and you're going to have to slip it over your shoulders. And this guy is the chief rabbi. He's not going to go. If it was his own cow, he also wouldn't pick it up. It's beneath his dignity. Or if he had more work to do than another person, and he does not want to set it all aside when another person is available to tend to the lost object. You are, let's say, you have two guys. You see there's two people driving their cars. One of them is driving for Uber, and the other one is just driving for fun. And you see that the other guy notices the lost object as well. Do you have to cancel your ride in order to pick up the lost object? Or can you say, the other guy will see it, the other guy can bring it to him. I'm going to lose money if I'm going to stop and pick it up. Therefore, with regard to those cases, it is stated, and disregard them, to permit one from refraining to return the object. And the question is why? Why would we have a license to refrain from returning a lost object sometimes? Let us say here too, although handling the lost object would be beneath his dignity, we should say there is neither wisdom nor understanding nor counsel against the Lord. And if God says that what you have to do is return this object, it doesn't matter what kind of personal degradation you would go through or what kind of personal losses you would go through. If you see someone else's thing, you must return it no matter what. Why don't we say that? The Gemara answers, there it is different, because the Torah tells us, and disregard them, indicating that under certain circumstances, one is permitted to disregard a lost object. So it's not that human dignity necessarily is what's coming to override and supersede the law of returning the lost object. It's built into the clause. In that case, there is a biblical directive that creates an exception to the prohibition. You may not disregard.
What if the priest sees the sheep in the cemetery and he knows that the sheep belongs to a very poor man and that the poor man will go hungry without the sheep?
That's a good question. It's a very good question. Could he wait outside the cemetery for the sheep to run out and then catch it once it comes out of the cemetery?
What if that's not possible?
So if that's not possible and he knows that the poor person is going to die if he's not going to get that sheep, then it changes from a case of returning a lost object and it turns into a case of saving a life.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to saving a life, the laws are different than returning a lost object.
That makes sense.
But the bottom line is that over here, it's not a good proof, because over here, it's not the human dignity that is superseding the law. The law itself says that sometimes you should disregard that thing which you lost.
If your next door neighbor's dog is out of their backyard and it's Shabbos, can you go get that dog and bring it back? You know the person, you know where they live.
It's a good question. It's a very good question, actually. Why are you asking the fact that it's on Shabbos?
Because if it wasn't on Shabbos, there'd be no question of whether you're going to return it or not.
Right. So on Shabbos, we're not allowed to touch an animal that does not belong to us. But it's not only that it doesn't belong to us, it's an animal that is not relying on us. For example, if you see a wild, wild cow on Shabbos, you're not allowed to pet it. Your own personal animals that are relying on you for their food, you're allowed to feed them on Shabbos. You're allowed to touch them on Shabbos if you need to. So I would ask a rabbi who's well-versed in these scenarios, but it would be possible to say that at this point, the neighbor's dog is relying on you for its sustenance. Because if it runs away, then it's likely going to die or get hurt or be hungry. So if sometimes you go over and you're friendly with the neighbor or you feed your neighbor's dog sometimes, I don't want to say for sure, but I could see that there would be reason to allow for handling that dog on Shabbos. If it's your dog, then the answer, I believe, is yes. You definitely could.
You could also say that if the dog gets lost, it'll cause your neighbor to be very distressed. And by retrieving the dog, you're doing a mitzvah for your neighbor, saving them from the distress of losing
their distress.
Yeah.
Oh, so that comes right back here to our discussion of human dignity.
We lost your audio.
Oh, sorry. I said that brings us back to the conversation about human dignity.
I can hear you.
Yeah, now you're back.
Okay, so we found a case in which human dignity overrides a Torah prohibition. And the Gemara suggests, let us derive a general principle. Let us derive a general principle that human dignity takes precedence over all mitzvahs in the Torah from this case. In other words, we see over here very clearly that the Torah tells us that if it's beneath your dignity, you should not go and return that object. So maybe we can learn from here to all prohibitions in the Torah that if it's beneath your dignity or it's going to cause you distress, you don't have to listen to that commandment. So this possibility is rejected because we cannot learn halachas, we cannot learn laws pertaining to prohibition from monetary laws. And the case of the lost object is a monetary loss, unlike other prohibitions, which are a prohibition. In other words, I don't know if that's clear, the difference between prohibitions and monetary, the laws of prohibition and the laws of monetary laws. In other words, whether something is kosher or treif is considered a prohibition kind of law, and whether you have to pay or you don't have to pay, whether you have to return the man's lost object or not return their lost object, that would be considered a monetary law. So just because we have a scenario where in a case of monetary loss, your dignity comes before the other person's money, that doesn't necessarily mean that your dignity will come before all other prohibitions in the Torah. For example, the prohibitions of Shabbos, kosher, etc. So now the Gemara is going to come and bring another proof from a brisa. Come and hear what was said in the Torah with regard to the Nazarite. Is everyone familiar with the law of the Nazarite, the Nazir in Hebrew?
No.
Okay. So a person, if they wanted to, 1 second. No. If a person decides that they want to take upon themselves to become a Nazir, a Nazirite, what that entails is it's a minimum period of 30 days. They could stay however long they want, that they're not allowed to drink any wine or eat grapes or anything that comes from the vine. They're not allowed to become in contact with any dead body, and they're not allowed to cut their hair. Anybody want to tell me who was a famous biblical figure who was a Nazirite? From when he was born. From the moment he was born, famous biblical figure. From the moment he was born, he was not allowed to drink any wine, cut his hair, or come in contact with the dead.
No.
Did you say?
Powerful man. Sorry?
Who did you say was a Nazarite?
I'm asking if anybody wants to tell me who it was, a famous biblical personality. He broke the gates of Gaza. Strong man.
Samson?
Ah, yes, Samson. Samson was a Nazarite.
So what is a Nazarite?
A Nazarite is the term for someone who takes upon themselves to not cut their hair. Are you still able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. To not, my Zoom disappeared for a second. To not cut their hair, to not drink wine or eat grapes or anything that comes from the vine.
We lost you. We lost our audio.
What makes a person so they do other stuff, and what makes a Nazarite different than any other person who has short hair?
Rabbi,
I guess you can't hear me.
can you hear us? Wave your hand if you can hear us.
I think it's
Can you hear me
screen
now?
froze.
Apparently
I
you
should be
can't
back.
hear us
Do you hear me now?
either.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Rita asked, what's the difference between a Nazarite and anyone who has short hair? So there are three differences. Number one, meaning it's not a type of person. It's a, I guess it would be under the general concept of a vow. But someone could say that they want to take upon themselves to bring a certain sacrifice. So the Nazir is a person who takes upon himself a period of Nazariteness, which entails not eating or drinking anything that comes from the vine, the grapevine, not coming in contact with any dead body, and not cutting the hair.
But why is that
They
different
could be-
than another person?
Yeah, but I mean, so okay, they do these things. I mean, what does that accomplish? What is
Yeah.
the purpose of doing these things?
Very good. The question is, what is the purpose of that? So usually a person would do that in order to come closer to God.
No.
It was considered a spiritual endeavor that they wanted to stay away from wine, stay away from death. I'm not sure why the cutting of the hair is there. It's a good question. And it was a time for
It's an
spiritual
ethical
detox.
code of conduct.
So it's basically
An ethical code of.
So it's
I'm
basically
sorry,
being
what did you say?
ascetic. It's a form of asceticism.
Yeah, it's a form of asceticism, and a person could choose to do that either for a set period of time or for the rest of their lives. Samson was like this for his whole life.
Okay.
So I see it's already
But it's a
11:15.
choice of following a certain. It's a choice of following a certain code of ethics.
Yeah. So I'm just going to share. So I see it's 11:15. So we'll continue this conversation next week. But I will say that he is actually considered a sinner, to some degree.
Who, Samson?
Anyone who
Okay.
takes upon themselves to become a Nazarite.
Oh, okay.
Considered a sinner?
And the reason why they're considered a sinner is because if God allowed you to drink wine and God allowed you to cut your hair and well, let's talk about the wine for now, right? If God allowed you to drink wine, who are you to say that you're better than God and you're going to not drink wine? So because he withheld the wine from his body, he is considered a sinner to a certain degree. But that's only in the slang of it, as it were. It's not that he's, God forbid, an actual sinner.
So then why would someone choose to become a Nazarite?
Why would someone choose to go on Alcoholics Anonymous? Maybe he had a drinking problem. They said, you know what, that's it. For the next 3 years, I'm not drinking wine.
Yeah, but when you stop drinking alcohol, it doesn't mean you stop cutting your hair.
So this was included as part of the
God
70s.
God doesn't command us to drink wine.
Yeah, on Shabbos we have to drink wine. Yeah.
And on Passover.
Grape juice wouldn't
And
work?
Passover. It's actually a very good question. What happens? This is a very interesting question. Sorry that we're going a few minutes overtime over here. What happens if a person is a Nazarite and it comes the night of Passover? What does he do? He has a problem.
What happens if it's an alcoholic?
Well, they didn't worry about those things in those days.
So an alcoholic could use grape juice.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
But a Nazarite cannot. A Nazarite cannot drink grape juice. Maybe he has to use potato vodka. I'm not sure.
They didn't have potatoes in ancient Israel.
You can use Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid. Okay. Tomorrow morning, brilliant discussion. Tomorrow we're going to be the Wednesday class has been moved to 11 a.m. Anybody would like to come join us over here? 11 a.m. Tomorrow morning we are going to be discussing if two people had a part in a mitzvah. One person started it and one person finished it. Who gets the reward for the mitzvah? Do they share the mitzvah equally? Does the guy who started it get all the reward? Does the one who finished it get all the reward? It's going to be a fascinating discussion with beautiful takeaways. Join us tomorrow morning
That's
here
an
in
easy
the
question.
office.
That's a very easy question.
Yeah.
There is no reward for a mitzvah other than doing it.
Let's find out tomorrow.
Rabbi, I
Let's
don't mean to
find out
digress, but Rabbi, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
I don't mean to digress, but in the beginning of the lesson, I was having technical problems with the feed, and I missed. You said that, how do we know that we have a soul? And if I got it right, you said because God tells us we have a soul. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
You're very welcome. Take care, everyone. Have a blessed day. And for those of you who can make it tomorrow morning, we'll see you tomorrow morning. Everyone else, God willing, we'll see you on Tuesday. And we'll be in touch.
Okay,
Okay.
bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.